The Dynasty market is 24/7 with trades happening across thousands of Dynasty leagues daily. It can be hard to get an understanding of which players' values are rising and which players' values are dropping. So, on today's episode of the Regression to the Mean podcast, we have our first ever episode of the Dynasty Stock Exchange, where we talk through the biggest risers and fallers in the Dynasty streets this week. I'm your host, Shaun, and I am joined by my fellow co host, good friend, and fellow knower of ball, Aidan Holler. Aidan, how we doing today, man?
I'm well, Shaun. Yeah, I'm excited. This is the debut of this episode format. You sent it over to me in a nice voice memo a couple days ago with wherever you were out on the move, likely with the dogs, and I was like, I'm all in. We love getting our hands dirty in the Dino community, kind of seeing who's rising, who's falling, and it felt like a super appropriate time to do this. If you haven't seen, we just posted some buys and sells on the channel, so go check those out. We highlight, what was it, four each? Four buys,
four
buys
and
four sells. So go check those out. This will be kind of similar to that, but we'll be more or less biased here. More just kind of trying to inform you guys what's going on in the market.
Buys and sells, we are targeting specific players that we have very specific player takes on. This is a little bit different in terms of a format where we're kind of just looking through the players that everyone is talking about or the most transactions are occurring for Dynasty. And we're going off of that, kind of giving our thoughts on it. Again, the format, I would say, is pretty straightforward. We have the 5 biggest risers and fallers over the past 30 days over on Keep, Trade, Cut. Aidan and I will go through each player and we'll give our thoughts on if they are a buy, a sell, or a hold. So we got a hold. This is a bit different now. Usually our buys and sells, it's one-sided. So we're going to be a little more neutral on some of these guys. Aidan, though, before we dive in, you highlighted what's in the feed, buys and sells. I've never felt more vindicated on that Penix sell. Not by his performance in the playoffs, which wasn't good, by the way. It was how...
That's generous.
It was the reaction. And that's how you know when people are triggered and upset by the mere, like, hey, maybe this guy's overvalued, it probably means he's overvalued. So just throwing that out there. Again, my favorite thing was the guy who's the comment. I forgot. It was a good comment. He said, I'm not even biased here. And it was his literal image of his profile was the Broncos.
Oh, it was the Broncos image?
Not even being biased here.
I thought you were going to say the guy that said, these guys are clowns and it's how you lose fantasy football. I was like,
you lose Dynasty by holding on to Penix. That's how you lose it. I mean, whatever.
That was a good one though, man. That was a good one. Got people going. Keep commenting in the comments. Yeah, it felt like there was like some really good, healthy debates in there. So we love hearing what you guys are doing in Dynasty. Like trades happen 24/7. 365 days of the year. So keep popping it in there. We're not experts, but we like to dig into the data, try to help you guys get an edge. So yeah, keep them coming.
And the feedback was great on the buys episode, by the way.
Yeah.
So we appreciate it. We appreciate you guys. So Aidan, again, before we dive in though, higher level, first time to our channel, what should the good people at home be expecting?
Yeah, welcome to the show. Off season's a ton of fun here. I think, a regular season we kind of follow more of like a set cadence. We've got waivers, we've got rankings. We keep it pretty simple, but during the off season, we do a ton of different stuff. So we're gonna be doing rookie stuff around the draft. We're still gonna be doing a ton of different Dynasty content, early rankings for PPR, a lot of different stuff. Fun up. Like if you guys have episode ideas, toss them in the comments too. But off season's a ton of fun with us. We keep it pretty light, but we're still gonna give you data to support our claims, our thoughts, etc. So enjoy the show. Feel free to comment, like, subscribe, whatever you want. But welcome to the channel, and hope you guys enjoy the show.
It is going to be a fun episode indeed. So let's kick things off here with our first player. He is the biggest riser over on Keep, Trade, Cut right now. He is up, I had to double check, he is up 27 spots over the past 30 days, all the way up to wide receiver 32. That is none other than the rookie wide receiver for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Jalen MacMillan. Jalen MacMillan is a 23-year-old wide receiver out of the University of Washington. He is going to be heading into his year 2 season in 2025. And it's a pretty big rise here for Jalen MacMillan, Aidan. So I got a question for you. You're taking a look at this rise, 27 spots in 30 days. Are you buying? Are you selling? Are you holding Jalen MacMillan at these new prices?
Yeah, so I'm sure people are going to be like super back and forth on this one. I'm personally selling. Um, this feels way too high for me, and it's not. Or it's a mix of what he did and when he did it, and then kind of next year. So I just want to start with like what the offense expects to be next year in Tampa Bay. Mike Evans is under contract for at least one more year. Both of the running backs are still there, along with Kate Otten, meaning there are still a ton of mouths to feed. Looking at the first couple weeks of the season, Jalen McMillan got close to zero run. He was putting up zeros while Godwin was still healthy. So at best, he's the third wide receiver in this offense. And in my opinion, that's a tough role in an offense. I don't really care how you dice it. I think, we've seen plenty of passing attacks support two guys. Three guys is really challenging, especially with the pedigree of Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. And then Shaun, if you just scroll down into his stats, I think one of the reasons he really started soaring was obviously the last couple of weeks of the year. Touchdowns left and right. Yeah, guy scored 7 touchdowns over the last, what is that? Or no, what is, yeah, 7 touchdowns over the last 5 weeks.
Yeah, 5 weeks of the year.
But what's a little concerning to me is not only is a lot of his fantasy production on touchdowns alone, which we love touchdowns. Don't get me wrong. We love touchdowns, but it's not like he's a high volume guy. He's nothing over 5 catches, nothing over 75 yards. Like, we're not getting monster games. If you take out like a touchdown in some of those games, we're looking at pretty pedestrian numbers. So the touchdowns were incredible. Baker Mayfield absolutely slinging the rock down the end of the stretch. Figures to return next year. But just looking at where he is, Mike Evans is wide receiver 33. Jalen McMillan is wide receiver 32. If you told me you'd rather have Jalen McMillan over Mike Evans, I wouldn't really understand the argument personally. Mike Evans still looks like he's got a couple of years left in the tank. So I get I get it. Jalen McMillan had a great year, but this feels way too rich for me. How do you feel about Mr. McMillan? I know this is Keegan's guy.
We liked him too, man.
Yeah,
we liked him a lot in redraft. I mean, we did our hidden gems episode right before our favorite sleepers. Jalen McMillan and Bucky were both featured in that episode. So we were in on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense. My thing with Jalen McMillan, I think he's a hold. All right, I think he's a hold at these prices. But if it starts to creep up into like wide receiver 30, 29, 28 range, like again, if you have him above Jaden Reed, that feels a little recency bias to me. Oh, yeah. I think him and Keon Coleman being right next to each other makes sense to me. They're both ahead of Josh Downs. I would personally rather have Josh Downs, even with the quarterback uncertainty, considering that he's such a high target earner. But I think McMillan's a hold, even with the splits, because like you mentioned, those last 5 games. So the first 12 weeks of the year, Jalen McMillan averaged 4 fantasy points per game. Like, if you look at this, man, it is a wasteland of performance. Like, there is nothing usable here. He was dealing multiple hamstring injuries, which is a bummer, right? And that definitely hampered it. Yep. And he was running behind Chris Godwin. He just wasn't going to get that run. But from weeks 13 to 18, if you can see here, man, he averaged 19.8 fantasy points per game, which is crazy. And again, we love rookies who close out the season well, and we love year 2 players. So instantly, Jalen McMillan, you got my attention. However, 35% of his total fantasy points in PPR came from touchdowns. That will regress. This is the name of the name of the podcast. It's the Regress to the Mean podcast, right? People will go down to their averages. Players usually do not sustain 35% of their production coming from TDs. So you're like, okay, then how does he get his fantasy points if TDs are going to come down? Well, the Bucs are likely to bring back Godwin and Evans, as you highlighted. Bucky and Shad are still there underneath. Kate Otten is still there. Those are guys who are getting targets. So again, are we going to offset TD production dip with volume? I don't think so. So, man, I don't know. I'm holding McMillan because we liked him heading into the year. He's tied to Baker Mayfield. Todd Bowles has now picked 2 really good OCs in a row. Liam Cohen may or may not stay, but I feel pretty good about Bowles picking a good OC at this point. Like, there is a ton of risk here for a mediocre year 2. If all the usual suspects are back and healthy. But again, he checks some boxes I like for rookies to do. Strong end of year, heading into year 2. If the value goes any higher, though, it's likely a sell for me. So
what's the lowest pick you would take for Jalen MacMillan? If you were to say, give me this pick for Jalen MacMillan, what's the lowest you'd go?
I mean, he's valued more than a late first, which feels like a slam dunk. He was going in the end of the second, third round.
If you could get a first for this year, or even a first in general, I think I'd do it.
Not a great receiver draft.
I know,
but if you like kind of hit home on MacMillan and you're looking to maybe get a running back, this is a good running back draft, and you could flip MacMillan for an opportunity, at a tight end. Or, I mean, honestly, I like MacMillan. MacMillan looked good. He looked more developed as the year went along, but this is a little rich for my blood, honestly.
Like, I'd pretty much rather have every receiver, like all 6 of those receivers, over him personally.
And he's 23, and we're going to talk about a receiver who's been in the league for 4 years who's 24. So it's not like he's super young by any means. He was an older prospect coming out of school, so just something to keep an eye on. All right, we're going to move on to our second guy. I don't think there's going to be much for us to talk about, but he is climbing the Dino ranks as it currently stands, and that is none other than the man with the best last name in the business, Michael Penix, declared the starter for year 2. He will be 25 at the start of next season and his second year in the league. He is up 5 spots over the last 30 days, all the way up to QB 16 over on Keep Trade Cut. He is likely going to be playing in an offense with Drake London, Kyle Pitts, Bijan Robinson, Darnell Mooney. They've got another good pick, potentially beef up the offensive line. A lot to like about Michael Penix. So, Aidan, I'm curious, are you buying, selling, or holding Michael Penix at these current prices?
Yeah, I kind of went back and forth on this one, but I'm holding. I think the first reason I'm holding is we didn't see enough. The sample is so small. Not only was it small, but it was at the end of the year. I forget exactly who they played off the top of my head. Let's see, were these all meaningful games? Carolina
Giants
and Giants
Washington
were already dead. Washington was a meaningful game, which played his ass off. Stats don't
they needed that Carolina game. Carolina was playing to try and eliminate the Falcons from playoff contention, because if the Bucs had lost, that Carolina game's a real game. And Washington too.
Yeah, so I think the sample is too small. Sample's too small in my opinion. 3 games. I don't know what we have yet in Michael Penix, but there's a lot to like. We saw the accuracy, we saw the quick decision making, we saw the zip on the football that we weren't seeing from Kirk Cousins. He is the starter going into 2025. That feels all but certain. Feels like Kirk Cousins could potentially be moved, which is like, what a massive egg on the face. That
they're already saying he's the backup because they have to, right, for leverage. But
yeah, they have to. Yeah. So, so he's going into the starter. QB 16 though, like, it almost feels a little rich for me. We're gonna get to another QB later, which I don't want to spoil, but there's a couple QBs below that I'd rather have personally. And I know you're likely not going to do a QB for QB swap in your leagues unless you're tossing in some other pieces. But like, even Jared Goff, man, I'd probably rather have Jared Goff over Michael Penix, even without Ben Johnson. You know that offense is going to continue on, but I think the price is still good. Like, I'd be hesitant to move this pick. For another reason too, like, you probably, just snagged a starting quarterback with a 2nd round pick in your draft last year. So, you kind of nailed that one. You had 202, maybe you took a wide receiver early. Now you got a starting quarterback, and starting quarterbacks, like we always say, are like, it's gold in Superflex. Like, you've got to check those boxes with the quarterback. So I don't know. Oh, what do you think about Mr. Penix here? It's, because I'm so conflicted, I just think I have to hold.
I get QB 16 is relatively fair value. He's a little steamed up the board, in my opinion.
It's a little
I think QB 19 is probably fair behind Goff, Lawrence, or Young.
Correct.
We've seen those guys play in the NFL, and I think we have a better understanding of what they can do. I think overall, though, Michael Penix, again, being right there with Brock Purdy and Baker Mayfield, it's a little much.
It's a little high.
But I get it. Like, Penix clearly has an enticing ceiling. his arm talent is crazy. Like his ball placement is crazy. Like some of those Twitter highlights of some of the throws he was making were awesome, right? And again, we saw the guy take how many snaps? I mean, he dropped back to pass 27 times, 35 times. So what? He had 105 attempts, right? In the 3-game sample size. He did not do much in terms of fantasy points. He scored 7 points against the Giants, 11 points against the Commanders, and 25 against the Panthers. So we did not see much in terms of production from Michael Penix, but there's a lot to like in the profile, right? First round draft capital. We like the fact that there's going to be continuity with the OC. He's going to be firmly entrenched as the starter heading into year 2. So he's going to get full training camp with starter reps. We got to see that supporting cast finally shine after being like, if man or if squad, right? Like outside of Kyle Pitts. But we saw Drake London look really good. We saw Bijan look really good. We saw Darnold Mooney look really good. So we have to feel good about that infrastructure. And, he plays in a division where there's just going to be a lot of shootouts. The teams aren't that good. So, like, there's, you're getting games against the Panthers twice a year, the Bucks twice a year, and the Saints twice a year, which is what you like. A lot of indoor games, too, with Michael Penix. So the profile looks good, man. I think he's a little oversteamed, but I would hold. I would hold. Why would you sell him? Like, you took him, you held on to him. He made some splash throws in his 3 starts. He didn't get much in terms of production, but he was always a year 2, year 3 play anyways. But I mean,
definitely don't buy. Definitely don't buy.
I'm a little nervous though because he has to be good like right away. Like we've talked about this with Bo and Jaden, like because their age. Like you don't want to look like a rookie. Like you want to look like you're ready to go, right? You're plug and play. And I'm not saying he didn't, but he wasn't amazing. Like he looked good against the Panthers. Everyone looked good against the Panthers.
Yeah, everyone did that.
But yeah, I mean, definitely enticing in terms of the throws he can make. So I definitely get why his value's high. If I had him in leagues, I wouldn't sell him. I wouldn't sell him, and I wouldn't trade for him right now either. There's no point in buying steam, and his price may even go up. He could be a guy that gets steamed up the board in training camp. I could just people love him. Positive training camp reports. Maybe they even bring in another offensive weapon. Their offensive line gets beefed up, right? Like they could be a really trendy pick to win the division. So I could see him even getting steamed up more. And maybe that's where it's like if he clears Purdy and Mayfield and gets up closer to like Bo Nix, Drake May, maybe you pull the trigger then. But until then, like I think he's a hold at his current price.
Yeah, I think we're pretty aligned on that one.
Yeah. Another guy who's soaring up the board, but I think is a classic buy high situation is Brian Thomas Jr. of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Like we highlight, Jalen MacMillan as the wide receiver 32. He's going to be entering year 2 as a 23-year-old. Brian Thomas is going to be entering year 2 as a 22-year-old. And he's already the wide receiver 7 on Keep Trade Cut, up 2 spots over the past 30 days. BTJ's rise has been pretty spectacular to watch. And Keegan, this is Keegan's guy right here. So Keegan, I know you're not here, Keegan Thompson, but take a victory lap because what a special season for Brian Thomas. But he's expensive, man. Wide receiver 7 is a hefty price for a guy who definitely had a pretty lucky run out to end the year. So I'll say, Aidan, are you buying, selling, or holding Brian Thomas as the wide receiver 7 right now in Dynasty?
So I'd like to buy. If you drafted Brian Thomas, you're not selling him though, is the thing. So like, I don't own any Brian Thomas. If I did, there's likely not a price tag I'm putting on this. Like it would be like 2 firsts or a first plus plenty. Because what this guy did was pretty special and what was just like kind of a disaster offense. Like you said, yeah, he was wide receiver 4 in PPR formats last year. Almost 1,300 yards, just under 90 catches and 10 touchdowns. Like true game-breaking speed. Like some of those deep routes and double moves this guy does is just special watching him run. So it's, the only knock on him is like there's still questions about Trevor Lawrence heading into what is this, year 5 or year 6 now? Who is, he's definitely the quarterback next year. Trevor, like there's no doubt about who's lining up under center next year. But one thing I will say that's a plus that could help is a new play caller. Doug Peterson is out. we love Liam Cohen. I think he actually interviewed there today. If I saw that correctly, so getting a fresh face in there to kind of turn around that offense and get some fresh ideas into that room, I think is a huge bump for him. So like, this is someone I'd like to buy. If he's available, go try to get him. I can't imagine he is available, but what do you think about Mr. Brian Thomas Jr. here?
Yeah, this is a play in dynasty startups, in my opinion, because trading for Brian Thomas is going to be pretty difficult right
Correct.
now,
Yeah, this is
right?
something you want in startups.
Yeah, so if
100%.
you're doing a dynasty startup, it's like, do I take Brian Thomas over Puka or CD, right? Like, these are the questions you ask yourself, or even ARSB. These are the types of questions you ask yourself. In terms of trading for him, it's going to be pretty expensive. I mean, he's already a top 15 asset in all of dynasty, wide receiver 7. He's ranked ahead of Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, Nico Collins. So it's pretty crazy to see what he's already done in 1 year in the NFL. I'd say overall, though, with Brian Thomas, I have a couple of things in the profile that I definitely want to highlight. So by every single metric, he had one of the great wide receiver rookie seasons of all time, 3rd best yards per route run over the last 10 years, and all-time 16th best PPR per game finish for a rookie. So, top 20 season ever for a rookie wide receiver in terms of PPR points per game. He's likely going to get a full year out of Trevor and a new scheme. And by the way, Trevor wasn't actually that bad this year. I mean, he made some dumb throws, but in terms of like, if you look at his raw counting stats, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be.
It was fun. Mac was like borderline better, but they were both both fine.
Again, that was like the most like the tough thing with BTJ is that was a pretty fraudulent offense to end the year. I mean, like Correct. There was no Evan Ingram, Christian Kirk was out. It was Brenton Strange and Brian Thomas, and literally the Jaguars defense was the worst in the league. And it was just Mac Jones throwing it to Brian Thomas 10 times a game. Like I'm not saying the Brian, I'm not trying to de-minimize it at all, but if you're trying to find a bear case with Brian Thomas, it's like that was about as pure of a run out as you're going to get. But usually when guys are good as rookies, they're good as sophomores. Like,
I agree. And he wasn't just good. He was flat out phenomenal. Especially, dude, the post-buy numbers were astounding.
Look at them.
Dude.
They're right there. Yeah.
Absolutely
they're crazy.
Astounding post-buy. So, yeah, this feels like a no-brainer that you'd want to buy him or that you'd want to draft him in your startups. Like, what's not to like? Sure, is he, maybe a couple, he's ahead of Nico Collins and Drake London.
I'd have him ahead of Drake London.
I'd rather have Nico. But at that point, like, we're just being greedy.
Yeah, we're just splitting hairs at that point.
Yeah, like you're just being greedy at that point.
I think BTJ and Nico Collins and ARSB are in the same tier for me. And then I have Puka and CD in that's in tier 2. And then I've got Jettas and Jamar in tier 1. That's how I'd tier it right now in the Dynasty streets. And I know that
AJ in there. Is AJ behind them?
AJ's in the Nico Collins. Nico. Okay. He's in the AJ Brown's in this tier.
Okay.
Right now, Keep Trade Cut has JSN and Drake. I would not have Drake London or JSN ahead of AJ Brown.
I would.
I know that. I understand that they're younger and Dynasty rewards that, but at the same time, AJ Brown's like 28. He's got 3 more years of being amazing. So I wouldn't overthink that. But yeah, I mean, BTJ is a buy at wide receiver 7. I honestly, again, Malik Neighbors. Oh, I forgot Neighbors, dude. Neighbors is in that tier. Neighbors might be in the Puka CD tier, honestly.
They have Neighbors at 3, don't they? Right.
That's high. Neighbors should not be at a Puka and CD, in my opinion, but he might be right behind him.
Yeah, we talked about that. I'd kind of just put Neighbors and BTJ together. They're different, but like, it's hard for me to rank one over the other.
The only reason there's a gap is because Neighbors went in the top 10 and Thomas BTJ went 17,
20, 17,
or whatever he went. I mean, they both went absolutely nuts at LSU together. So I think Neighbors is a higher target earner. At least that's his reputation. But I think what BTJ put on tape rivals what Neighbors put on tape this year. And I feel better about the Jaguars' offensive infrastructure than
that's
than
what I was
the Giants,
going to say.
For sure.
The Giants have 0 plan at QB, but they'll do something.
Yeah. Buy Brian Thomas. If anyone's willing to trade him, buy him. If you're in a dynasty startup, I could be pretty aggressive. I would not blame you if you're like, this is who I'm going to build my team around. I honestly think he has that kind of ceiling at this point. Guys that do what he did in year one are usually really good in year two. Funny, that's what I would say in the transition to this guy, because this guy had a Jared Goff year one. It was just
I can't believe we're back
in
here.
Trevor. And I bought a little too early. I was buying last offseason. But
you still
Bryce Young here.
You still bought.
I still bought him. I was telling people to trade CMC for Bryce Young plus. That is on record if you want to go look at it, by the way. Bryce Young here is our fourth highest trender. This is a quarterback that's now been labeled the guy heading into year three. Bryce is entering his age 24 season, third year in the NFL. Currently the QB 19, up 3 spots over the past 30 days. Bryce Young, what a run, man. What a run to close out the year. Again, Dave Canales has labeled Bryce the guy. We've got our guy, is what he said. With all that in mind, Aidan, buy, sell, hold Bryce Young heading into 2025.
Yeah, so this is the guy that I hinted at earlier. Bryce is such a buy for me. At his price, it feels like such a no-brainer. QB 19. What we saw over the second half, or really just post-benching, I'll call, was like an entirely different quarterback. The confidence is back. The decision-making is back. He's moving around. He's rushing. He's like everything like maybe not quite everything. That like I might be getting ahead of my skis a little bit, but like you're seeing the QB that was. He won the Heisman, or was he a finalist? He won a Heisman, right?
He won the Heisman.
Yeah, he won a Heisman. We're seeing that again. Bryce Young feels like the quarterback that was promised, the quarterback that prompted the Panthers to trade up to 1-1. And like you said, he is the guy. They are going to go get him a wide receiver 1 this offseason. It's, they feel confident they've got the right QB in that offense. Dave Canales is just an absolute QB whisperer, man. Geno, Baker, now Bryce. The dude just knows how to build an offense and get the most out of his quarterback. So I would rather Bryce Young over Michael Penix. It feels pretty easy to me personally to make that choice. We've seen a lot more tape, and he was the better college quarterback too. So Bryce Young at QB 19 feels like one of the best bargains at the quarterback position in Superflex, because you're at the fringe of like people who might not have a job when you're talking about QB 19 on keep trade cut if you go look at kind of some of the guys behind him. So
it's a little murky. JJ McCarthy's murky. I personally, maybe 2 is a good buy low, but 2 is not a fun buy. Sammy Darnold, we're maybe going to talk about him in a second.
Yeah.
Dude, I think Bryce Young's a buy. Typically, we like to see guys have their end-of-year surges when they're rookies, but it kind of feels like we got that in year 2. Like that, figured it out. I figured, like, it's not too fast for me. I feel like we got Alabama Bryce at the end of the year. Just a confident, he had swagger, like he was having fun. He played excellently, man. Like, so again, weeks 8 through 18. So you highlighted it after the benching, right? But there's kind of these 2 phases of his season. So 3 phases. He comes back after being benched. Weeks 8 through 18 is 1 bucket. He averages 18 fantasy points per game during that stretch. Then after the bye week, weeks 12 to 18, he averaged 21.4 fantasy points per game. Like, and if you look against some of the matchups he had, KC, good defense. Tampa Bay played a lot better in the second half of the year. Philadelphia, best defense in the NFL. He faced Dallas when Dallas had Micah, which again, very different defense. Arizona played guys hard all year. Atlanta had some like up or down. Like, this is not a super soft schedule to scoff at, I would say, overall for Bryce. And he had some big games. He had them in that Philadelphia game. Like, if Leggett doesn't drop that ball, they probably win that game against a team a win away from playing for the NFC Championship. So, yeah, man, I mean, Bryce played his ass off, and there's a lot to like about Carolina. They have a great O-line. They have a solid offensive play caller that's their head coach, so that's not going anywhere.
Nope.
I mean, their running back kicks ass. And they have an interesting collection of young playmakers, like JT Sanders looked good. Leggett had some promise. We all love Jalen Coker here. But you plop like a tailor-made one in this offense, all of those pieces. Because Thielen looked good too, man. Like, that's actually turned out to be a really good signing. all things considered, after we gave that team so much shit for bringing in Adam Thielen. But
For
Adam
sure.
Thielen's now had 2 good stretches in individual seasons. Like I don't think Thielen's putting together authoring like a 17 game stretch anymore at his age.
No.
But like clearly he can still ball, right? He can still go out there and play.
Yeah.
So man, there's a lot to like about the Panthers. And again, QB 19, like dude, QB 22, that feels like such a steal. Like he was probably, if you look at what he was at, like 3 months ago or 6 months ago, let's see where he was at.
Low.
He was, he actually, it was QB 32. If you see this in December, he bottoms out to Will Levis territory, right? Like this is where he's at. So pretty steady march up. I definitely do think
the dip.
Yeah.
You bought the dip.
I bought him when he was in the QB 20 range, and now he's back at QB 19. So I didn't get too much of a W here. But man, if you were in here believing in Bryce at 34, good for you, man. You're probably trading a third or like a second, maybe late second, early third for him. But man, I'm a big fan of Bryce. I think he's a total buy. I would buy him right now. Dino.
Yep.
I have no problem with that. Last riser here, man.
Tough.
He's
finish, bro.
It's decelerating a little bit for Sam Darnold, who was what was he, the QB 9 on the season, 320 fantasy points, authored just an absolute incredible comeback season for a hyper talented prospect out of USC. Sam Darnold is going to be entering likely free agency, TBD on that. Age 28 season, 8th year in the league. Currently, he is the QB 22, up 2 spots over the past 30 days. Sam Darnold, where are we at? Buy, hold, or sell, Aidan?
So I'm actually going to buy Sam Darnold. And it's not something I'm like over the top excited about, but take out the last 2 games of the year. Like obviously those 2 games were ugly, but this was a fantastic year for Sam Darnold. Like you mentioned, QB 9, dude's slung it for 4,300 yards, 35 touchdowns, just like total control of that KOC offense. It doesn't appear he's going to return to Minnesota, but this is a guy that's probably going to sign like a 3-year deal somewhere, probably pretty front loaded to where like he's going to play another 1 or 2 years as a starting quarterback in the NFL. And again, back to what I said, like you need quarterbacks and super flexes, and this is a pretty cheap option to do it. So this isn't someone I'm going after if I already have my 2 set QBs. This is someone where I'm like, crap, man. I've got 1 QB. This is a pretty crappy class, all things considered, for QBs. Like, I don't think your answer to slotting in a second QB lies with this class, because I really don't think any of them are going to start from day one outside of maybe Shadur, maybe Cam Ward, or, we'll see who slides up the board as we get closer to April. But I think like if you needed a second QB on your Superflex team, you could do a whole lot worse than Sam Darnold. So it's not the most inspiring, but I also think your Sam Darnold owner could be a little sour on the way the year ended as well, and could be looking to offload it before the ship, possibly bottoms out. But what do you think about Sammy D here?
So I've got him in a league. So I drafted a startup 3 years ago. I took him as a late round flyer, and I've held him throughout the entire time.
Yeah, there you
go. This season was awesome. Just blocked him in. I had him and Joe Burrow. It was awesome.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, and this is a league where I drafted Justin Fields too early and got off of him. So like it felt good to have that second quarterback in Darnold. I am not trading Sam Darnold. I am not buying Sam Darnold. I am holding Sam Darnold. Primarily because like I don't really see the upside in selling him right now versus after he gets his contract settled. Because I just think it's really risky. Like because you could sell him right now, and then if he signs a 3-year deal for $100 million with the Vikings, you're like, wow, I really wish I didn't I wish I didn't sell him, because he's gonna jump up to like probably QB 18, QB 17, and then you could trade him at QB 17 if you wanted to, right? Like nothing materially has really changed that much for Sam Darnold, outside of the fact that he got some guaranteed number. Like it could be one of those incentive laden deals too, or one of those deals where they can get out after, year 1, year 2. So I don't really think it changes that much. I do think his ceiling lives with the Vikings. But again, if he gets signed to the Raiders and the Raiders give him 150 million, like he's gonna explode up the rankings too. Like, you know what I mean? There's just a lot that could happen and positively, and I just don't see that much negative things happening for Sam Darnold. He's going to start for a team next year. It is a QB needy league with a bad draft,
100%.
as you highlighted. He's
100%
going to
he's starting.
start. So there's just no need to sell Sam Darnold right now. Just hold him. Like, he had a great year, awesome year. Shout out to Sam. I appreciate you, Sam. But there's no need to sell him right now.
Yeah.
That just feels reactionary. It honestly feels reactionary, but I wouldn't buy him either. There's a lot of risk. There's just a lot of risk to do either at the moment. So I would just wait until the situation gets settled before you move on or try and acquire Sam Darnold.
Give me Sam.
You want him. He wants him. All right, we're going to move on to our biggest fallers. This one will probably do pretty quickly. It's pretty sad here. We were big fans of this guy as a rookie. We didn't necessarily draft much of him in year 2 because of the injury concerns, like the post-injury concern. But Tank Dell entering his year 3, age 25, he's dropped 11 spots on keep trade cut, all the way down to the wide receiver 43.
Yeah.
I'll start things off here. I think it's a sell. We're both sells, right?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
This is like sell as soon as possible at this point. But yeah, like tell them why. Yeah, like it feels so simple.
Yeah, and again, I don't think this is a coincidence that Jeff Mueller, a guy we follow on Twitter, did his whole like analysis on basically what got released yesterday about the injury that Tank Dell suffered, which he tore his ACL, MCL, LCL. There's a partial tear of his meniscus, and he dislocated his knee. That's the Teddy Bridgewater injury, by the way, if you're following at home. So it's going to require multiple surgeries. The first one happened this week. It's so much swelling, he had to wait for it to go down. He's not going to play in 2026. Like, he might come back, and it might be one of those miraculous, like Nick Chubb things, but I don't know, man. He already showed major signs of decline after breaking his leg. He was not the separator he was in year 2 that he was in year 1. He's got diminutive size, and he relies on his athletic ability that's unfortunately not going to be there after this injury. Like, he may be able to get 70% about back what he was, but at that size, you kind of need all the athletic ability twitch you can get. He was an old prospect. He's already 25 entering year 3. And like, there's a legit chance he falls into like the wide receiver 60, wide receiver 70 range. It's like, why do that? Why, like, dude, if you could get Jawan Jennings, who actually would trade Jawan Jennings for Tank Dell? That doesn't make sense. Like, no one's doing
that wouldn't make sense.
Like, Jacoby Myers is interesting. I don't know, man. Like, I wouldn't trade any of these guys for Tank Dell. I think if you go and try and trade him right now, it's gonna be hard. It's gonna be really hard to trade Tank Dell.
Yeah, I don't know why you'd be trying to acquire him. But yeah, I'm pretty much like, his career is like close to over. It's
on life support.
These are such brutal, and like the first one, it's like, okay, we can overcome the tightrope, but like we're probably, we knew this year would probably see a dip at least at the beginning. Even started to show some signs late, which was encouraging. And then he's likely going to miss the entire season. So not playing again until what will be his 4th season in the NFL it's hard, man. Like, the NFL passes you by pretty quickly. Like, there's a good chance. Like, I think he'll play, but if you told me like Tank Dell, like doesn't play again in the NFL, it wouldn't be crazy. Like, his knee got absolutely obliterated. So it's
he's so small too. This is not a typical player.
Small.
Yeah, it's the hard part. He already is at a disadvantage because of his size, and you're going to start taking away his athleticism. I know it's a different game, but like, it reminds me of Isaiah Thomas when Isaiah Thomas got that hip injury and it was just over. He no longer had that advantage that he had. It just sapped him of his athleticism. And I feel bad for Tank. Very fun player to root for. Absolute baller in year 1. I mean, baller in year 1. And it could be a cool comeback story, but at the end of the day, comeback stories are great, but you got a dynasty roster to protect. Complete stay away for me in startups, and
if I could get like a 2nd round pick or something for him, shit. Even an early 3rd.
Give me Tank Bigsby, bro. Give me Tank Bigsby.
That's an easy one. Yeah, No debate from the two of us on that one.
Yeah.
But the next one, there is some debate.
This is the one we defer. So the next guy who has fallen a little bit over the past 30 days, he's actually dropped 5 spots from the wide receiver 16 to the wide receiver 21. That is George Pickens. So George Pickens is 24 years old, entering into his 4th season. Pretty divisive player. Kind of an asshole. So it's easy for normal people to just like F this guy. I'm going to kick things off here. I think he's a buy at the wide receiver 21 price over on Keep Trade Cut. This guy's immensely talented, Aidan. Like, he can beat zone, he can beat man, he can beat press man coverage at a pretty high clip. He likely remains a Steeler, considering that room has 0 talent and they need all the talent they can get. But I think it might be a bull case if he leaves the Steelers, even though Tomlin's been good with these types of receivers, and these head cases that have left Tomlin haven't necessarily translated. So, like, I think I'm okay with him remaining a Steeler, but it is what it is. But, like, look, the QB issues remain persistent. They've been persistent his entire career, but the guy has been pretty good with bad QB play. Like, I'll give him credit there. And like in 2023, he had a stretch where he was a borderline league winner. Like, he was on the Best Ball Mania team that won $1 million in 2023. He had a stretch this year for about 6 weeks where he was a top 12 PPR wide receiver. Just really high volume. I mean, a high share of the offense target earner with big plays and big playability, who was a natural TD regression candidate. I know it's in there. Like, I know George Pickens' talent is in there. And with the right QB or OC, he could have like a top 8 fantasy season. If he was 28 years old, I think I'd be selling. But he's 24. He's got upside. I think it could be with the Steelers or somewhere else. But if I had to pick a player right now in the NFL that could have a DJ Moore, Scary Terry type season, it would be between Chris Olave or George Pickens, where they're just good players who finally hit home. With better QB player, offensive coordinator schemes. So that's why I'm buying George Pickens. I mean, basically fringe. I mean, like, back end wide receiver 2. I feel pretty good about that, man. Like, if you look at his overall profile right now and Keep Trade Cut, he is behind Roma Dunze, Devonta Smith, Zay Flowers, Chris Olave, Jameson Williams, Jalen Waddle. I think that's pretty fair. Pretty fair in terms of his ranking. I think you could drop him kind of behind Waddle if you wanted to. But I think as he continues to drop, it's a buy for me. So why are you selling Pickens at this price?
There's a hand. So first, the Steelers have no plan in place at QB. We talked about it a little before we started recording here. Russell probably walks from what it sounds like. I think they've re-signed Fields and probably draft someone, which I don't think is good for any passing attack. Just looking at the Steelers his entire career, they've been a bottom 10 passing attack. So, like, this is just not a team that has done him any favors.
No.
And he just doesn't feel like a guy that, like, Tomlin's going to tolerate a whole lot longer. Showing up to games late at, like, towards the end of the season, just feels like a total. It, like, why does everyone that goes to Pittsburgh just, like, totally go off the deep end? But, like, for me, is I think I'm just resetting. Like, I'm gonna take the mid first round pick. So this wide receiver class is not deep, but I do like the guys at the top of this class. You've got MacMillan, you've got Luther. You said DJ Moore. Luther Burden's got some DJ Moore, Debo Samuel, and him. And then you got 2 guys I really like too, in Trey Harris and Emeka Egbuka. Those are guys I would happily take a chance on and kind of unload the roller coaster ride that is George Pickens. It's like, I was looking at his stats just now, and I'm like, he had a pretty good year. Like, not really.
It fell apart after the hamstring injury.
Doesn't score touchdowns. He doesn't command a high, target share and just like volume in general. And it's just like, maybe he's just one of the players that, like, we think is better than he is. It's like,
he's a dog, dude. I'm telling you, he's good. I do think it's kind of a miracle. His QB, he had Kenny Pickett. Like, that was who he was working with, man.
But, like, you look, but we've seen receivers produce in bad offenses. Like, go look at Brian Thomas. Like, he produced. It's like, he hasn't been better than wide receiver 30 in 3 years now. Like, we can't give him the pass forever. And in my opinion, I'd rather roll the dice on a mid first. But I also get it. Like, I've seen the play. Like, he passes the eye test. But for fantasy, I don't think it's a guy I'd want to roster. Like, give me one of these young wide receivers. Let's reset the clock. I'd love the top 4 wide receivers in this class personally. I think I'd love to roster one of those 4 over George Pickens.
The quarterbacks that have thrown to George Pickens: Kenny Pickett, Mason Rudolph, Mitchell Trubisky, Justin Fields, Russell Wilson, and that's it. Yeah, Mitch Trubisky, Kenny Pickett, Mason Rudolph, Justin Fields, Russell Wilson.
It's not getting better though. It's probably Justin Fields or Russell Wilson plus a rookie.
Could be
next
Mac
year.
Jones, right? It could be Mac Jones. It could be Sam Darnold. It could be Aaron Rodgers. They might draft somebody. Look, it's not great, but the fact that he went for 1,105 touchdowns with Kenny Pickett, Mason Rudolph, and and what's his name? And Mitch Trubisky is a miracle. Like, that's insane.
Give me the pick.
So yeah, I get it. I mean, if you want to sell him because he's a dipshit and could be out of the league because if he's a dipshit, he had character concerns coming out of Georgia. Like, I get it. Like, I think he's good though. The talent is there.
I think he is too, but like the environment is so poor around him, and he's still so high valued for pretty limited production.
I feel like you're either a Pickens guy or you're not. I feel like that's
I don't think I am. Yeah, I don't think I am.
I don't think I was either, and then I drafted him this year, and then he did have that stretch where I was like, oh, damn, he's good. And then he kind of, fell apart. But what are you going to do? This should be a quick one. Will Levis here is falling down the ranks. He is down 2 spots all the way down to QB 30. Over on Keep Trade Cut, he is going to be entering his 3rd year in the league, 26 years old, one of the older super senior type prospects. I do think it's a sell. You know me, I like athletic, big-armed quarterbacks. And, honestly, if you look at his game logs from a fantasy perspective, I thought it would be worse than what it was. But, I mean, I don't know, dude. Like, he'd be like an interesting buy if he dropped to like QB 40 or something. But he's not a great QB. He's already 26. He's going to be a backup in Tennessee or he gets traded. I don't think a late career breakout is out of the question, but I don't think it's likely. Like, I don't think it's very likely. I think he's on the Sam Howell path. That's what I would.
Which isn't a good one. That's not a path you want to be on.
I will say the film bros like him because he's got a cannon, right? And he's just an idiot. Like, I don't know, man. He just doesn't make
brains, bro. Yeah,
he doesn't make good decisions at quarterback, which is just a bad. It's not gonna get you games, man. It's not gonna get you games.
And like, by no means was that Titans offense like fantastic in terms of pieces around him, but there were guys there. Ridley had a pretty good year. Tony Pollard was fantastic. Hopkins was still around for a little bit. Like, this wasn't a team that, in my opinion, like they gave him the resources to at least have a shot this year, and it just didn't look good at all. Awful decision making. Just feels like the game doesn't. It feels like the game is too fast for him. And you consistently see it with some of the erratic play. So yeah, sell for me. He's like, you can't really get anything for him, which is brutal. No. It's like a third round,
third pick. Or fourth. So it's almost like, in a sense, if he keeps sinking, it's like, why not? 4th round pick for Will Levis. Stick him at the end of your bench, see what happens. Like,
kinda, yeah. It's like you're probably not hitting anything down there anyways.
I'll say this, dude. Like, if his counting, okay, because you watch him on Reds, like, because again, I'm not out here watching the Tennessee Titans. Sorry, guys. A lot of my Will Levis exposure is people making reels of him with doing big time throws or throwing just some of the dumbest throws I've ever seen, or just Scott Hansen being like, "You have no idea what happened with the Tennessee Titans," and it's Will Levis throwing an 80-yard bomb, or just doing, again, one of the dumbest things ever. He's like if Anthony Richardson was way worse, which is not where you want to be. It's not where you want to be right now.
No, not where you want to be.
But he's got better stats than A-Rich. It's kind of funny.
What do you think? Career. Just like quickly while we're like finishing up, like, what do you think they do at 101? Do you think they pick a QB? What's their plan at QB? Because I don't think he's starting.
Man,
but like, are any of the QBs good enough to be 101? I don't know. Do you try to slide back for like someone desperate like the Raiders or the Giants? I don't know.
It's just like Sam. I mean, not sorry, I called him Sam. Levis wasn't like it wasn't like he was just doing the shit that coaches hate. That's why I'm comping him to Sam Howell. It wasn't like he
it was like a way worse Jameis, like a way worse Jameis.
Yes, like he just was making the dumbest possible decisions.
Yes.
Like it's one thing if you're inaccurate, like a Rich is. It's another thing if like you know what the right play is, but you continuously just make the wrong play. And that's what he was doing. And coaches don't stand for that, man. It drives them nuts.
They don't. No, they don't.
So that's why he got benched multiple times this year. But he did look way better after the second benching. He actually had a nice little stretch where he threw 8 touchdowns to 2 picks. Showed some chops as a rusher. But just, I don't know. If you want to trade for Will Levis and try and galaxy brain it, just wait for him to continue falling because he probably will after the draft. Yeah, next guy we got here is I don't really get why he's trending on Keep Trade Cut right now, but Joe Mixon is one of the biggest fallers. Age 29 next season, entering his 8th year in the league, down 3 spots over at RB18. Are you buying, selling, or holding Joe Mixon right now, Aidan?
I'm holding Joe Mixon. This year was like it like it felt like a book. Like there were so many different chapters in the journey of Joe Mixon of 2024. It started really well. We had the injury in Chicago or in Houston against Chicago. That was absolutely blazing for like a month and a half. It was just like phenomenal. And then post bye going into the fantasy playoffs was a ghost. Sub 10 in 10.6 in one of them, but just truly abysmal down the stretch. But all things considered, man, you look at a 28-year-old. He rushed for 1,000 yards, had 11 touchdowns on the ground. Like
he had a good year.
He averaged 17 points a game. If he had that like 17-game stretch, we're probably looking at a top 10 finish for Joe Mixon. So I don't know why you would sell him unless you're getting an offer that's really robust. I'm definitely not buying him, mainly because of the age. And I also think it's almost certain that they're bringing in someone to split touches with him. This running back class is so deep, so deep. And Dameon Pierce is Dameon Pierce. Yeah, Pierce is Dameon Pierce. So I'd expect someone else to be in that backfield with him next year. But like, I don't know. Definitely not buy him. If you sold him, I guess I wouldn't totally knock you for it if it was for a good price, but this is a guy that was still commanding like the bulk of that backfield and was actually pretty decent at his age. Yeah, it was.
Dude, they built the offense around him, for better or for worse. I wish it was the Nico offense, but it was the Joe Mixon offense.
Run pass.
He was the best pick in redraft for like a stretch. He came out of the gate super hot, and then from week 16 to 13, he averaged 22 fantasy points per game. PPR.
Yeah, that lost me the league. That was good.
He dealt with ankle injuries though. Like he had the high ankle sprain and then he re-injured his ankle again. So like you can kind of hand wave it, but 29-year-old running back dealing with a year of ankle injuries, right? Like that you got to count that into the price. He looked good against the Chargers in the divisional round. He went over 100 and scored a touchdown. So like he's still a good running back. He's old, but he's likely the starter for the Texans next year. I just wouldn't feel the need to sell him until after the NFL draft. Like why? Let free agency and the draft play out because maybe they don't do anything and it's just the same thing. It's like, why would you sell that?
What's this contract again? I'm just seeing how
they traded for it. They traded for that Cincinnati contract because Cincinnati didn't drop him. So
he's still under contract for 2 more years. There's a potential out. I don't know whose option it is.
He's doing the interviews after the game. He's like kind of a leader on the team. I think he's firmly a Texan next year. And
for sure. Definitely next year. Beyond that, who knows?
And the Texans will have to have a better offensive line, right? It's been 2 years of this where their offensive line is terrible. Like, come on. Are we going to get a better offensive line for the Texans finally? Because it's been rough for 2 years now. Those guys.
I agree with that. They beefed up the defense. It's time to focus on the trench on the other side this year for them.
The last guy we got here, this is a fun one. This is somebody we hyped up all offseason as a buy in Dynasty, as a buy in redraft. We were all in on Kyler Murray as kind of a return to his glory days, and we didn't get it. We didn't get it. It was by no means a terrible year for Kyler, but it was pretty lackluster. I mean, he got outscored by Sam Darnold, just for context. Played the same amount of games, he got outscored by Sam Darnold. That's rough for Kyler. Guy was going to the 6th round of redraft. Kyler is going to be entering his 7th season in the NFL, age 28, starting next year. He's the QB 13, down 3 spots over the past couple of months. Is he a buy or is he a hold for you, Aidan?
Yeah, like I'm gonna cop out here and say he's hold, but I lean by. Mainly because of the price. So, like you mentioned, he's QB 13, still plenty young. And all things considered, actually had a decent fantasy year. He was QB 10 on the year. It felt like a lot was left on the bone given the James Conner role and how many touchdowns he scored. But I think the thing that it was really encouraging was the rushing, which, you're already hovering over. His best rushing output since 2020, just under 600 yards and 5 touchdowns. Like, you love the weekly floor that Kyler Murray gives you, which I was really impressed with. It. Another thing I just didn't like about the offense with Petzing was like we say time and time again, like there was just zero easy buttons.
No.
Everything felt really complicated. So I think, Marvin Harrison in year 2, we've got Michael Wilson going into year 3. We've got Trey McBride going into year 3. We've got, a really steady backfield. There's a lot to like with Kyler Murray, especially given where he's priced. So like, I'm definitely not selling him. I would buy him. Like I'm somewhere between hold and buy. I'm somewhere in the middle there. But I also just love Kyler Murray, so like I'm trying to not let my bias sway me too hard here. But I just think you can do a lot worse at the QB 13 slot. Just kind of looking at what's around. I mean,
Bo Nix, like Jordan Love, and Caleb Williams are ahead of Kyler Murray. I'd have Kyler ahead of all 3 of those guys.
I think I would too. I would have Bo Nix last, but
we know our thoughts on Bo. Bo
we're not
get Bo behind Brock. Get Bo behind Brock Purdy, and I'm in.
So, but what are you doing with Kyler here?
I'm buying Kyler Murray, QB 13. Like that feels like a buy. Like again, the keep trade cut. It's been relatively consistent last 3 months, down 3 spots. He's got Caleb, Jordan Love, and Bo Nix ahead of him. Jordan Love is ultra inconsistent, just like Kyler Murray can be. Caleb Williams, comp to Kyler Murray, similar players. And Bo Nix, again, we just did a whole podcast on Bo Nix, so I'll save you the point.
He is very under contract, at least for this year.
So the thing with Kyler, and also Gannon came out and said 100% will be the starter next year. I did not think he played poorly to be benched. He had a stretch too.
No.
That game against the Dolphins where he was just, he went nuts. He had a stretch where I was like, okay, 20, 22, 4, 28. All right, maybe we're cooking here. 28 against the Jets. He had a nice game against the Rams. Like there were some signs.
There were stretches for sure. There were stretches.
He just wasn't very good down the stretch. Like he didn't show much of a ceiling. But he finished top 12 on a point per game basis with a sub 4% TD percentage. If you look at his TD percentage, that's kind of in line with his career, but he's had stretches where he's gone up to 5%. And I think we're going to need him to clip 5%. And if he does get a 5% TD percentage, and instead of throwing 21 touchdowns this year, he throws 30, I mean, you're looking at a really solid year. Yeah, for Kyler. QB. He just needs a little more TD luck. Yeah. So like, I'm just a little skeptical about Petzing. And going into the year, we liked Petzing.
I didn't love.
Just kind of felt a little Greg Roman-y. You know what I mean? Like,
and he's gonna be back.
I get it, and a defensive coordinator coach is gonna love someone like Petzing. It just felt like somebody who was doing everything he could to make the run game better and maximize the run game. But I felt like he could have ran Kyler more, and when he did run Kyler, it was pretty nasty.
Yeah,
but like, you didn't see Marvin Harrison in the slot. You didn't see Marvin Harrison getting some of these big crossers over the middle of the field. Like, you just didn't see somebody really focusing on making this a easy passing offense. And it just felt like such a slog. Felt so conservative. So it kind of feels like his ceiling's limited in Petzing's offense.
But if let's say his ceiling is QB6, QB8. Like his ceiling's higher than QB10. I think that's for sure. But sure, Yeah, like if QB6 is the ceiling, man, sign me the fuck up. We're looking at, he's priced at QB13 right now.
He's entering into his prime. And the rushing looked there. It wasn't like the rushing was bad. So yeah, I think he's a buy. Yeah. I think I'd take him over Bo Nix, Jordan Love, or Caleb Williams for sure.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah. So that's where we're at, man. 10 players. Jalen MacMillan, Michael Penix, Brian Thomas, Bryce Young, Sam Darnold, Tank Dell, George Pickens, Will Levis, Joe Mixon, Kyler Murray. A lot of quarterbacks on today's show, man. But, this is Dynasty Superflex. It drives the conversation. All right, and that was fun. Our first ever Dynasty Stock Exchange episode. Hopefully we do these monthly, dude. I would love to talk through some of the biggest risers and fallers throughout the year. Aidan, anything to say to the listeners before we get out of here?
No, enjoy the divisional weekend. Some awesome football coming up this weekend. So hopefully you have Monday off for work and enjoy the football. And yeah, take it in. We've got, 7 games left this NFL season. So don't blink or it'll be gone before you know it.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Until next time.